Hello, year one. Nice to see you again. I hope you enjoyed our last lesson where we looked about God, Christian beliefs about God. We looked at the fact that they only believe in one God. We looked at the fact that they think God is all powerful and all knowing. And we looked at this really difficult, was it difficult? I'm not sure that's the right word. We looked at this really interesting idea. I suppose it is quite difficult. That there's a difference between certainty about knowing that this stapler exists because we can see it and point to it and take a photo of it and draw a picture of it, and faith, which Christians have in God, which is based on maybe having an experience of God, maybe it's based on reading about God, maybe it's based on just believing that God is real. Because Christians can't take a photo of God, they can't necessarily draw a picture of God, they can't point to God and say, God is real, God is here, but they have faith in God. So that was what we looked at last lesson, and today we're looking at this question: who was Jesus? So maybe you could pause the video for a second and just say out loud everything you already know about Jesus. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you're an expert. Maybe you already know loads of stuff about Jesus. I'd be really interested. So pause the video for a moment and have a think, what do you know about Jesus? And we'll see if it comes up again in the video. So, one of the big differences between Christianity and other religions is that Christians believe God had a son. So God had a child, which is quite remarkable, really. There's not many other religions. In fact, I can't think of any other religion in the world that believes that God, who last lesson we said was not really human and very special and unusual, was able to have a son. And so the son that Christians believe God has was called Jesus Christ, and he lived 2,000 years ago. And on the right hand side here, just above me, you can see this picture of Jesus, a very famous picture. It's a mosaic made of lots of tiny little tiles. But maybe, like, a big thing about Jesus is we don't really know, a bit like God, what he actually looked like. So, there's no real way to know. 2,000 years ago was so long ago. No one drew a picture of Jesus when he was alive. There certainly weren't any cameras to take photos of Jesus. We can kind of guess what Jesus looked like. We can guess that he probably had quite dark skin because he lived in the Middle East. And we can guess that he probably had a beard because lots of people at the time had a beard. But if you look at the different pictures here, often Jesus just kind of looks like the people who are worshipping him. So can you see on the top row there is actually a Jesus from China. So it's Jesus looking quite Chinese. In the middle here, just above me there, is Jesus from Ethiopia. So that's Jesus with black skin. And then on the bottom, on the far side, that's a very famous painting of Jesus by someone who's Italian. So Jesus with white skin. But we don't really know what Jesus looked like. So whenever we show a picture of Jesus, it's always our best guess. Or is it always our best guess? No, not really. Sometimes it's just kind of what the artist looked like or what the person paying for the painting looked like. So most people agree that a man called Jesus did exist. And that's not just Christians. Whether you are non-religious or Jewish or Muslim, Hindu or Sikh, nearly everyone these days agrees that probably, or almost certainly, there was a man called Jesus who lived in Nazareth, which is the name of the town where he was born, around this time. There just seems to be, there's not lots of evidence for it, but there is a little, there's enough evidence for it. So Christians, however, that's kind of certainty. It's not quite, but it's kind of certainty. You can point to records and show that Jesus existed. But Christians have something else. They have faith that Jesus was the Son of God and that he was able to do things that would be impossible for normal humans. Do you remember last lesson we said God could do impossible things? So it's that link between the two. Jesus is God's Son, but Jesus is also able to do impossible things. And those impossible things have a special name. And that name is a miracle. So this is quite an unusual word in the way that it's spelled. Miracle. Mir-a-cle. Okay, so it's M-I-R-A-C-L-E. Miracle. And we're going to look at those later in your school career. So later on, when you get to like year 2, year 3, year 4, we'll look at miracles again. But today we're going to look pretty quickly at one of the miracles that Jesus performed. So the story takes place 2,000 years ago on the edge of a lake called the Sea of Galilee. Jesus had been teaching people by the lake, and he sent his followers, called the disciples, out in a boat to cross the lake. Suddenly, a huge storm came down on them, and it rained hard, and waves lashed against the side of the boat. Out of the mist, the disciples could see a figure coming toward them on the water. They thought it was a ghost or a spirit, and they were afraid. Can you see this painting on the right-hand side here? That's the boat there in the middle of this storm. And then look, what's this coming towards them in the sea? It looks like a ghost. It looks like a smudge on the painting. I wonder who it could be. Let's have a look. Jesus had walked on water across the lake to rescue them from the storm. Is that impossible? I think if Jesus was a human, then yeah, it would be impossible. You can't just walk onto a lake over the water. What would happen to you? You'd sink straight away. You'd go straight to the bottom. Jesus said, "Be not afraid. It is I, Jesus." Peter, who is this guy, here we can see in the painting, answered him and said, "Jesus, if it is you, let me come to you on the water." So he was in the boat and he said, "Jesus, if you really are on the water, I want to walk to you on the water." So Peter nervously put a foot into the water and found he could walk on its surface. He was amazed, but he was also scared of what was happening. Suddenly, he began to sink below the waves and begged Jesus to save him. Gosh, can you imagine how scared he was in the middle of this storm, stepping out onto the lake, and suddenly he's magically walking on water, and just as he gets far enough away from the boat, he starts to sink down into the sea. Jesus put out his hand and pulled Peter up to stand on the surface of the water again. "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt me?" Jesus said. When Jesus and Peter returned to the ship, the disciples were amazed by what had happened. They had witnessed a miracle. The storm calmed and they were able to head safely to shore. And so look at this painting again. Can you see it's a different painter from the last two? But here's Jesus and here's Peter, and here he's walking on water, and this is Jesus rescuing him, and lots of angels up here. Let's just take a quick second to think about what just happened. So Jesus says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt me?" And if you remember, faith is that belief that Christians have that Jesus and God are special, that Jesus and God can do things that are impossible for other people. And as soon as Peter thought, Jesus can't do this anymore, he began to sink below the water. But as soon as he realized that Jesus was performing a miracle, an impossible thing, he was able to walk on the water again. So that's what this means. "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt me?" So we kind of answered that. Why do you think Peter began to sink? Well, that's interesting. I wonder if you could tell me what I've just told you. So why do you think Peter began to sink below the waves? What was he not doing anymore? What does the story say he didn't have enough of? Yes, faith. He lacked faith. He didn't have enough faith. He didn't have enough belief in Jesus. It was because he had lost faith in Jesus. He no longer believed Jesus had given him the power to walk on water. Christians believe that having faith in God and Jesus is very, very important. Christians have faith that God exists, even if they can't see or touch God. Christians have faith that Jesus was the Son of God, who could perform miracles, even though the stories are very old and the miracles seem impossible. Well, there we go. That rounds up another lesson of RE, looking at faith, looking at Jesus. You can find a copy, a shortened version of the story and the pictures here. But what I would like you to do today is perhaps go back in the video if you want to, but I would like you to draw a picture here of the story of Peter and Jesus walking on water and Peter sinking in the water. I'd love to see what you come up with. You could illustrate it, so you could draw a picture, but you could also write a caption. So you could write the story of what happened, as much or as little as you'd like. I'd love to see some of that. So I will see you next week for more RE. It's been a pleasure again. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Yeah, I'll see you soon. All right, bye year one. Bye bye.